Imagine being beheaded, your head severed from your body by an executioner's blade. That's where most stories end. But for one Christian bishop in 3rd century Paris, that's where the impossible began. Saint Denis didn't just die on that hill. He stood up, picked up his severed head, and walked 6 kilometers while preaching a sermon, making him Christianity's most famous cephalophore, literally a head carrier. This isn't just a medieval fairy tale. It's a legend that shaped France itself, turned Paris into a sacred landscape, and asks a question that haunts us even today. What could make a man's faith so powerful that not even death could silence him? To understand why Denis died, you need to understand what he threatened. The year is approximately 250 AD. Emperor Decius has issued a brutal decree. All citizens must publicly sacrifice to the Roman gods or face execution. Christianity isn't just illegal, it's treason. Pope Fabian sends a missionary named Dionysius Denis to Lutetia, the settlement we now call Paris. Denis arrives with 2 companions, Rusticus, a priest, and Eleutherius, a deacon. Denis converts hundreds, maybe thousands of Gauls to this radical new faith. The pagan priests watch their temples empty, their influence crumble. They have one choice: destroy this threat. Denis knew what was coming. He chose this path, knowing it led to torture and death. That choice sets up everything that happens next. After months of torture, Denis and his companions are dragged to the highest point in Paris, Montmartre, the Mount of Martyrs. Rusticus falls first, then Eleutherius, now Denis. The blade falls, his head hits the ground. According to the Golden Legend, something supernatural occurred at the moment of execution. As the executioner's sword fell, witnesses reported hearing angelic music so beautiful that even hardened Roman soldiers wept. The prefect's wife, Laertia, stood watching. When she heard that heavenly chorus, she declared her belief in Denis' God. The guards killed her immediately. The chroniclers called it baptism in her own blood. 3 heads rolled. That should have been the end. But then Denis stood up. The medieval mind saw this as a theological statement. Death itself had been conquered. The body no longer obeyed natural law because it operated under a higher law. What Denis did next transformed this from a miracle into a mission. A headless body walking is shocking enough, but Denis didn't just walk, he preached. The Golden Legend tells us that Denis' severed head, cradled in his own hands, continued to speak. Not screams of pain, not confused mumblings. A sermon on repentance in perfect clarity. Guided by angels and surrounded by celestial light, Denis walked 2 leagues, about 6 kilometers, through the Roman roads north of Paris. Eyewitnesses, and medieval accounts insist there were eyewitnesses, watched this impossible procession pass by. He walked until he reached a specific spot, not random, not where he collapsed from exhaustion, a spot, according to the 9th century writer Hildwin, which the Lord had shown him. There he handed his severed head to a Christian woman named Catulla, and finally, he died. Catulla buried him on that exact spot. A shrine was built, then a chapel, then a church. Eventually it became the Basilica of Saint Denis, the royal necropolis of France, where kings and queens would be buried for over 1,000 years. Think about what Denis actually did. He didn't just perform a miracle. Even in death, especially in death, he was still building God's kingdom. The walk wasn't the miracle. The walk was the mission. His impossible walk literally reshaped Paris. That 6-kilometer route became a pilgrimage path. Medieval Christians would retrace Denis' steps, marking 8 stations corresponding to events of his passion. You can still follow it today. The Rue des Martyrs marks their path. At Montmartre, there's a fountain called the Miraculous Fountain, supposedly where Denis paused to wash his severed head. By the 7th century, King Dagobert I made Denis' Basilica the spiritual heart of French monarchy. The battle standard of France, the oriflamme, was kept at his shrine. Knights rode into battle crying, "Montjoie, Saint Denis." A 3rd century martyr became the patron saint of an entire nation. Denis wasn't the only cephalophore. Scholars count at least 134 in French hagiography alone. But Denis was the first, and he remained most famous because his story gave sacred meaning to an entire city's landscape. Paris itself became a reliquary. The question is, what kind of conviction drives a man to preach even at the moment of execution? Saint Denis of Paris answered that question not with words, but with an impossible walk. A walk that said, the message is bigger than the messenger. The truth survives the speaker. Faith outlasts flesh. The headless bishop walked so his message would run for centuries. 1700 years later, we're still listening.
If this video opened your eyes, share it with someone who needs to see it. Hit that like button to help us spread the word, and subscribe because we're diving deeper into the forgotten treasures of our faith that could change your eternity.